Hi guys, welcome to the Sazanovich Real Estate YouTube channel, and today we are interviewing Jason Thomas, one of our real estate agents here at CIR Realty. And today we're gonna ask him a couple of questions about commercial real estate. That was his main sphere of doing business. So Jason, tell us a little bit more about yourself. When was it when you started?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I got into the business around 2009 as a residential realtor. Like most commercial realtors, we start in residential, but for me, I got into commercial about 5 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago. And the reason why I got into it was, I was just curious about the business. I wanted to diversify my residential portfolio. And I had a few friends in the business. They told me it was a good idea to get into commercial, and there's less competition, there's great learning opportunities, and
it's a completely different game. I mean, it's a completely different.
It's completely different,
yeah.
And that's why I understand a lot of people make the decision to go either residential or commercial. But for me, I still wanted to have a little bit of residential still there. The bulk of my business is still commercial.
When we're talking about commercial, can you specify like exactly what kind of like commercial projects you're like dealing with?
Right. So commercial is a broad spectrum. So it can be retail. We know what retail is. It can be office. It can be industrial. There can be leasing of those products or sales, purchases. And it can be business brokerage, which is business without land or building.
Mm-hmm. So when somebody has like, let's say, a pizza shop and they're looking to sell it, but the building itself is on a lease, right? So they're looking to sell.
That's right.
The active business, kind of like with all the clients, all the equipment, all the supplies and everything.
That's right. So that would be typically like an asset sale. So the first component would be the sale of the business, like the restaurant. And the second component of that is the assignment of the lease. So there's two parts to that. There's first getting acceptance on the deal, and then part of the conditions is getting landlord approval for the assignment of the lease. So if the landlord, for whatever reason, decides they don't want that particular tenant, then it was part of the conditions. So then we just back out of the deal.
Because you see, we are dealing. We have a lot of clients who come from like Eastern Europe, from post-Soviet countries, and the way that commercial leasing is done back home is completely different than here. Back home, you can approach the commercial landlord, ask him for a 3 months lease, 5 months lease, 6 months, and here you go. You started your business, it didn't work out. You kind of like walk away, no strings attached, no penalties, no nothing. But here in Canada, it's a completely different story. And people always surprised when they see, oh, how come landlord doesn't want me as a tenant? It's place is sitting vacant, right? Like, why wouldn't they rent to me? Or because I don't have any history in the business, or because I don't have any like proved record, or so it's completely different. That's why I wanted to ask you, tell a little bit more about like new business owners and how they kind of like what kind of difficulties they have when they are looking to like lease space.
So yeah, I don't understand all the steps out in Europe, but here there's definitely the majority. I would say the leases are longer term, meaning like 3 years plus. There are some short-term leases or even subleases, which could be 6 months or longer. But the majority of leases, I would say, are longer term for multiple.
So you would say 3-5 years is the average.
At least. I do. Most of my deals are 10 years.
10 years, okay.
Yeah, but and it depends, and I'll give you reasons why it's longer. So, landlords like to see predictable cash flow. So, they have a building like a strip mall and they're renting out the spaces, and so they want stability in their cash flow. They don't want someone there for 2 or 3 months, unless that there's a particular need to have somebody there for short term. Like it could be a sublease situation where the tenant is there, but they can't pay the rent for some reason, and they're in a longer term lease, but they need to sublease some of that space. So typically it will be a longer term lease. There's some technical terminology, in commercial leases. When we talk about a shell space is basically a box, a concrete box. And so if someone is going there and they're going to build out, for example, a restaurant, and they're getting financing, the lender will typically ask for a longer term lease, 7 years, 10 years, for example. And the reason being is they want to amortize the cost of the build out, the leasehold improvements, over a longer period of time.
Because if you're talking about restaurants, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars
Easily.
invested into the space to make it look like a restaurant out of just concrete
That's
walls,
right. So it could be a restaurant, it could be medical, dental,
Could be spa, like
spa, any sort of business, and it's typically hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out. I always tell the clients, talk to your accountant, talk to your lender, of course, to find out what that best term is, but usually it's a longer term.
So how would you recommend to deal with the situation for the new business that are not really like sure how it will go, like if business will be profitable at all? Sometimes yes, you have a business plan and you show it to the bank and everything, but you never know, and you have to commit for 10 years, right?
So that's the challenge. It really is a challenge for startups, new business owners, and the landlord's aware of that. Typically what they want is a strong covenant, which means strong credit by the tenant. So they'll go through credit checks, they'll go through net worth statements, business planning, they'll ask for a lot of items. But businesses fail in spite of all of that, right? Not necessarily because of a lack of that, but could be just poor management, or the model didn't work. And so the unfortunate thing is, if you're signing a long-term lease, you could get stuck in a long-term lease.
Even, for example, like right now in Calgary, when we have this Mardalup roads closure, and we have these articles about businesses going out of business just because there's no foot traffic, because there's no walkways and roads are closed under construction. So the business owners going out of business and suing the city for this situation. I'm not sure if you read this in a newspaper, but there's all different kind of things that might go, sideways.
And it's really unfortunate that, things like construction can cause, and I've seen it all the time. And, it's challenging. It's not just the city, but there needs to be cooperation with the landlord as well. They could be doing some work, and hopefully that's a good dialogue between the tenant and the landlord as well.
Okay. So the thing to understand for the new business owners is, even if you found the lease, even if you are ready and willing to get this lease, it doesn't mean that you're gonna get it, right? So the landlord might say, no, you don't have a strong enough case, you don't have enough credit, you don't have enough experience with this new business idea of yours, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about making a strong case.
At the end of the day, the landlord doesn't want to see the business go under either, right? So they're trying to find the best fit. And, obviously there's a hierarchy of typical retail clients. And the landlord loves to see like a national franchisee, a bank, a Subway, a Starbucks.
That's why the franchise is a good option when you start, right? And you don't have experiences in fast food or some other stuff, because the franchise company will come and build everything for you. All the marketing, all the support, all the supplies, everything is handled, right?
Right, and it's all about mitigating risk. It's all about risk. So if there's less risk, and in any strip mall, you're going to have mom and pops. So you're going to have startups in any strip mall. But the goal of the landlord is to diversify that risk. And have some stability with more stronger covenant national franchisees, banks, brand names. And they will have a mix of some mom and pops as well. Maybe it's a dry cleaning shop or alterations, that sort of thing. And that's typical of any sort of strip mall.
Also, there's a rule, like, let's say if you're looking to open like a pizza shop, but there's already a pizza shop in the strip mall, so you have some like limitations by the landlords, how much competition they want to have on. So
you bring up a very important point. Especially in larger mall settings, there's going to be a variety of different foods. If we're talking about the QSR, quick service restaurant space, you might have Mexican food, you might have Indian food, Japanese food. And so when those people get in there, whether it be a mom and pop or a national chain, they want some sort of protection or exclusivity. And it gets challenging when you're having larger strip malls with wider menus, because a landlord doesn't want to have a tenant come in and offering 100 items in terms of like width. So Mexican food, Japanese food, Indian food, all under one brand. They'd rather have specialized brands, so a shawarma brand, Japanese sushi, and so on, to bring variety to the mall. And that way there's no conflict of menu. So it does happen. Sometimes there's overlap, and that's a conversation with the landlord. And then they'll sort of look at what's a primary item versus non-primary item.
You should make your case and explain that, yes,
Yeah.
it's kind of similar, but we have not just Mexican, Mexican fusion or something like, I don't know.
Yeah, because they may
something-
offer bubble tea as their main product and maybe some wraps on the side.
It's not the same as a shawarma place.
So
something like
if there's another place that's offering wraps, then there could be a conflict. So that's why they really ask for a business plan and a detailed menu. So those are some items that the tenant needs to prepare.
Okay.
And it's not just for the landlord, it's for the tenant's best interest. They're preparing a business plan to the lender to get financing, but it's also best for them because they're putting all their thoughts in their head on paper to explain what the business is, how it's going to grow over 3 to 5 years, what the menu is. There's all sorts of things that they need to do, and so it can be tough sometimes. It's best to bring in a consultant because they might be good at cooking, for example, but they may not understand the marketing strategy and the business part of things. So my advice is always have a good team around you. So have a good accountant, have a good lawyer, have a good realtor, have all these people in place so that you can be successful.
For me, I remember when I started in real estate and I was researching some commercial, because I also have a commercial license, but I've never practiced it. So that's why most of our clients just go to you as a referral, because you help us a lot with clients looking to find a lease or buy a commercial space. But for me, it was interesting to find out that some of the big shopping malls, not just only they charge rental rate, but they also charge a portion of the revenue as a rent. Can you tell a little bit more about this?
Well, yeah,
For example, like Chinook Mall, let's say, or some other
Yeah, some landlords are different than others in terms of how they structure the lease. So there is something called percentage rent. It's not very common though. I've come across it only a couple times. Typically, a lease is composed
Can you tell us about the typical situation?
Yeah, so typically, your lease is going to be composed of two parts, which is the net rent, your base rent it's called, and your operating costs. So the operating costs, and they're both expressed in per square foot annual basis. So your operating costs are things like common area maintenance or CAM and property taxes. That's the bulk of it. There might be some other extra items included, insurance, management, security, some other items. But property taxes forms the bulk of operating costs.
Okay, so let's say, as an example, we're talking about small pizza shop, right? And they found a small local plaza. They're looking to rent this small space. So a base rate, what would you say typical for Calgary? Not too expensive, not too cheap, average per square foot?
Yeah, I mean, retail rates, they're the highest per square foot versus office or industrial. And it depends on a lot of factors, location and, construction and so forth. But, you're probably looking at on new space around $35, $40
per square foot?
Per square foot.
And it's annual rent?
Yeah, so that's always expressed annually. And then the operating cost is dependent on that particular building. And so once a year, the landlord is responsible to provide a statement of how they came up with that operating cost per square foot. So if it's $15 per square foot, how is that exactly broken down? And so there might be elevator costs, there might be all these other charges. But
There's no elevators, or like a snow to
Yeah.
shovel, or some
Yes.
landscaping, or some roof repairs, or some other maintenance.
Yes.
You know, so
And that's going to be calculated based on the square foot that you occupy. So they'll come up with a statement once a year and then provide that to the tenant so that there can be a justification of a reconciliation of the costs. So if it's under or over, then it'll be credited or debited back to the
But
tenant.
you would say typical $40 like
Yeah.
base, and then like around $15
That's
per
right.
square foot for the operating costs.
That's right. Yeah. So I've done quite a few new projects, and typical shell space would be something of that sort, around $40 or higher per square foot.
What is the most like kind of like unique and interesting case you can share with us? Like what you've like helped to find a lease for, or what?
I mean, every deal is different, and I love working with business owners. It's so much different than residential on different levels, but it's great working with business owners who are trying to start a new brand. So many different examples. It could be, I do a lot of QSR or quick service restaurants. For example, I brought in a pizza brand from Ontario called 2-for-1 Pizza. And so my friend became a franchisee. So I helped them find a location at Trinity Hills. And so that's a franchise. So there's royalties involved and so forth. And they have all these prerequisites on qualifying the right person. And so that built out happened, and there was definitely some challenges. Maybe we'll talk about that later, but there's definitely challenges in construction.
Because it was a brand new.
Yes, it was a
space.
brand new space, and he was new to the whole food space. So he has a completely different background. So,
Was he just an investor, or he's involved in day-to-day operation?
He's going to be day-to-day operations.
Okay.
Yeah. And he'll have some, support staff. But it's people who don't understand about, it's a big commitment, getting into the franchise business or any sort of restaurant business, food business. There's a big commitment. And so, especially if it's a new space, you have to really manage that construction and get everything in line so that you can open in time. And that's always a challenge.
With a side question regarding this new construction, do you start paying rent when you open your doors for business, or even before, like when you just started like renovating the space?
So typical lease, for example, it could be like a 10-year lease, but there's always incentives that the landlord will offer as part of that lease. And so again, more terminology that we talk about in commercial, but there's a period called fixturing period, which is a period in time where the tenant gets to build out or renovate the space. And that could be 2 months, 3 months, whatever is negotiated into the lease. And during that time, there's no base rent, no operating costs being paid, but they are responsible for utilities. Consecutively after that, there's a period called free rent, and that also varies depending on the length of the lease. And that could be, for example, 2 months. During that period, operating costs are due and utilities are due, but there's no base rent.
But you already started the business. You're already acquiring customers and services.
Well, you're starting to open. You're starting to ramp up slowly, but
because
it gives a little bit more time.
Okay.
So it might be, for example, say 4 months of fixturing period and 2 months of free rent, so 6 months. To kind of help the business kind of get ready.
And again, you mentioned landlord is also interested that you kind of succeed in your business, right? So they kind of trying to help you out, because on the first couple of months, cash flow is tight. You just get into word out. What about you open the new business?
Yes.
So it's challenging, right?
And it's challenging. Even if you're with a national brand, you need to be properly marketed throughout the community. Everybody needs to know who you are. You have a grand opening, and so there's a lot of work that has to be done behind the scenes to make the business a success.
I remember interesting case that you told me about the daycare, right? Because you help to find a working daycare, and the way you negotiated different like leases and purchases and daycares that is not operating, it costs less than the daycare that is already up and running, you know, so all the different aspects.
Yeah, so daycares they're unique. Typically, those will not be asset sales; they will be share sales. So the licenses will flow with the share sale for the buyer, typically, so that when they buy the shares of the corporation of the seller, the licenses will flow with that.
So you don't need to reapply with the city and all these delays and everything, right?
Exactly. So it makes things a lot easier versus like an asset sale. Now, if it's not operating, that's a different story, you know. But what I was going to say is, so you'll have your fixturing period and your free rent period. So suppose it's 4 and 2, that's 6 months. But there'll also be 1 more month where your deposit will cover. So when the landlord takes a security deposit, a portion of that will go for the first rent, and then the balance will be held as security deposit till the end of the term, the end of the lease term. So if it's 4, 2, and 1, you know, that's 6, that's 7 months. So really they're not collecting full rent until month 8.
Okay.
So it gives a little bit of breathing room for the tenant to make sure they're operating.
And the deposit that you mentioned, like, is it like 2 months amount or more? Like what's usually the...
Yeah, it can be. It's kind of dependent, but it can be typically two months of rent. Yeah.
So when a business owner is looking at the lease, what are the most important parts of the lease that they need to, you know, to really pay attention to?
That's a good question. I mean, the actual lease, because there's several steps that we go through. When we first find a location to lease, I put together what's called an LOI, or letter of intent. And really, it's a simple 2-pager stating some very basic terms, and we submit it to the landlord just to say we're interested in the space. Then it goes to the next step of either offer to lease or straight to the lease document. The lease document is probably like 50 or 60 pages, and it covers every single possibility. If there's a demolition, if there's a fire, if there's a change in control, like a sale, it covers everything.
And usually is it done by the landlord? Or?
Yes, it's always prepared by the landlord or landlord's lawyer. And so I always recommend the tenant to get the lease reviewed by their lawyer. So they can get a proper legal counsel to review all the terms, because although there's similarities, each lease is different. So in terms of
don't just skip it
covered.
and sign it, right? At least read it.
No.
And
Yeah.
better to review it with a lawyer.
Yeah, because I mean, typically in commercial, the leases favor the landlords. In residential, it's the other way around. But you know, you want to have a lawyer to review all the terms and provide an opinion. So that's really key.
And is this like a document negotiable? Can you negotiate some terms, like add or, you know, remove?
I mean, typically it's a template by the landlord, so it's already been vetted through by their lawyer, and so typically they don't modify it. But there has been cases where there is some modification does happen, because it's a standard document they use for all their retail tenants. So they use the same document over and over again. Yeah.
Okay.
But things to watch out for. I mean, just based on some of my past deals, you have to really read everything word for word. For example, you know, is there electrical being provided? Well, you would think that electrical and HVAC would be standard items for every space, but it's not the case. Landlords will just go by the book, put in their bare bones, and try to get away with a few things.
Is it for new construction or
Yeah,
even
I'm talking about new construction.
Okay.
So again, it's more like technical terms, but you know, they may provide an electrical disconnect, but they may not provide the panel. Well, the panel will cost a couple of $1,000s. And you know, that's just for a person starting out, that's a big expense.
Every $1,000 matters, yeah.
Every dollar matters. So you have to really look at what's being provided. You know, some landlords, I remember seeing one lease where they didn't provide the HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, but they provided an HVAC allowance. So they'll say, well, we'll give you $10 per square foot on the space, but you're responsible for HVAC, because the landlord doesn't want to get involved with HVAC. So every landlord is different, every deal is different, but it's important to just, be careful and, read through the entire contract.
Do you have any like unusual or interesting cases that you want to like share some?
Yeah, I mean, most of my deals are fairly simple. They're restaurants, they're office spaces, so nothing really exciting or interesting. I did have one interesting client. It was the government. So it was the
The
government.
most interesting
The
client.
most interesting. You think it's boring, but it's the government of Alberta, and it was their wildlife department.
Okay.
So this is interesting.
Okay.
So they wanted a space to process roadkill.
Oh, wow.
So there's so much roadkill, I guess,
Yeah.
on Alberta roads.
Yeah.
You're
Like
driving through
you see deer and you see
going to-
coyotes and you see all different
from
kind of-
small animals to
yeah,
large
to
animals,
like even moose, like some.
and it's apparently it's happens all the time. So the wildlife department is a big department, and they're always picking up animals off the road, and they need to process it. They need to find out if it's diseased, all sorts of things. So they were looking for a space for freezer storage, for lab work, for everything, and that was kind of interesting. Yeah, that was unusual. You don't really come across something like that, right?
Like a meat shop, yes, but the
Yeah.
roadkill processing.
No,
space.
no, exactly. And even the lease was unique. It was guaranteed by the government, so it's a very unusual lease that I've never come across, since.
Because in their case, they don't have any income, coming in, right? But just the government kind of like.
So we have to tell the landlord this is the government that's getting involved. It's their stamp. It's their,
The landlord can be sure it's gonna be paid. So.
But the landlord was happy because it's the government. So there's a guarantee on the money.
And it was probably like 10, 15-year lease. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Fine,
they love doing that lease, and they went over and above what they normally do. So the government had some specific things that they needed to do on the interior space, and the landlord was more than happy to spend the money to upgrade the space to keep the client. Yeah. So they wanted the client so badly, right? So it was an interesting case. Yeah, I think every deal there's a little bit of creativity involved, and I don't have like a specific example, but I think this is where the experience of the realtor comes in versus someone new. I suppose it's the same with residential as well, right? So,
But residential, I would find it's more simple than commercial. Commercial, it's like every case is different. Like selling churches, selling like pizza shops, or leasing some industrial garages.
It definitely is more unique. It's a longer sales process from my perspective. So there's a lot more moving parts, I find, but I find it very rewarding. And so, in terms of creativity, there's always where we have to find out what's the best deal for our clients in finding the space. So we need to ask a lot of questions about their business, and so we have to try to understand their business as best as possible. Ask them all the questions in terms of what are they looking for exactly, location, things like that, so we can find and narrow down the space.
And it has to be some trust involved, because sometimes clients don't want to tell anything, right? And it's becoming like challenging or almost impossible to help them if they don't want to like. Yeah,
there seems to be a lot more disclosures that's involved. You really have to know a lot more about their financials, and finding a pseudo space that's where it can be tricky. So, but so far things have been going really well, and
Can you also tell our viewers about how the realtor work is paid when you're dealing with the commercial? Because for the buyers in residential real estate, most like 99%, it's all covered by the seller, right? So in commercial space, like how does it usually?
So it's similar and different at the same time. So we have standard fees on residential. In commercial, it's a little bit different. It depends on a lot of things. Is it a lease? Is it a sale? What's the value of it? So I can break down a typical lease as an example. So, for example, if it's a 10-year lease, a typical lease on one side would be 2.5% the net rent for the first 5 years, and then half that amount, 1.25, for the balance of the 5 years. And so that's obviously applies to both sides. Now, if it's a sale of a building or something, it's not like your typical 3.5, 1.5. It's more flat based. And again, this is coming from the seller's, brokerage side, right? So, so it's similar in that respect. But the fees are a little bit different. So as the pricing goes higher and higher, that percentage goes lower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, like, if somebody is watching this video right now and they have this idea in mind that they want to find a lease or buy a business, when they approach you and you discuss the situation, you can give them an idea that it's already like your fees are already included in the.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most
So
likely, right?
that's how I operate. So I don't charge my buyers, any fees. So I explain how the fee breaks down if that's what they want to know, and tell them that they're getting expert advice, to find them the best solution for what they're looking for. And that's really important. It's difficult for them to, especially in commercial, to try and do it alone. Trying to find a business or trying to find a space to lease. And some people try to do that, just go on Google and so on. But
Kijiji, Facebook, and trying to find
sure, but it's very difficult because commercial, it's not just MLS. There's other databases involved, and it's also a different kind of network. So, you could.
You don't even know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, and the industry is very small in the sense that we typically know each other. I do a lot of tenant representation. So typical brokers, the big brokers, will do landlord typically, representation. So I'll just pick up the phone, call them, and say, I've got a new client looking for this kind of space. Do you have anything coming? And so it's a little bit more personal that way.
So there might be not even advertised anywhere. It's just in their pockets, right? And you having the good personal relationship with them can always approach and see what you can find.
And that happens a lot in commercial where there's new projects going on and you want to find out where the next project is, versus say residential, maybe not as much.
So let's say somebody approaches you. So what's the typical step-by-step process? So you're gonna meet with them, sit down, get idea what they're looking for.
Yeah, I'll ask a lot of questions. What are they looking for? Because you could be an investor, for example, right? So if you're an investor, what are you looking to invest in? What's your experience like? Have you invested in multifamily before? Do you want to add multifamily again? Or are you looking for something else? Do you want to get operationally involved? Or do you want to just be more hands-off with your investment? So I'll ask a lot of questions. Now, if they're a business owner, then I'll ask different types of questions. What experience do they have? What kind of business do they want to be? My job as a realtor is to work on the real estate portion. So when it comes to competitive analysis of different businesses and all that sort of stuff, I'll leave that with them to try and figure out if that's the best location and how it competes with others. But it's asking a lot of questions and then taking them slowly through, explaining basically all the steps. We'll put together a letter of intent once we find the space, and we'll move towards the lease. Or if it's a purchase of a property with land and building, then we'll write a typical contract and explain exactly how the contract works. And it's very similar to residential. You'll have conditions, you'll have a deposit, closing date, things like that.
What was the quickest deals that you had with your clients, and what was the longest?
Commercial is typically a much longer process. I remember when I first got into residential, and I listed my first property, and it sold before I got the sign up. Obviously the market.
Sometimes it happens.
Sometimes it happens. I was just fortunate that was my first deal, and obviously sometimes it takes longer than that. But on commercial, I find that the process is much, much longer. And it depends how many people are involved. Is there head office somewhere? Right now I'm working on a deal where head office is out of the Netherlands. So the head office has to approve everything. So there's a process involved. Architects have to get involved. And so that could be months and months. And I think we're 8 months in already. So, the key thing in commercial is to have a lot of things in the funnel, because And same applies to residential too, right? But it's just a longer period. So it could be months before you get paid, for example, right? So
Has it ever happened to you when somebody approached you looking for something and you already had something on the books that you can a couple of weeks and you already had negotiations started at least? And sometimes we have like years when you're like researching and find.
yeah, even if we find the right, it still takes time because if it's a new space to build out, it's going to take them 3 months. If it's a small space, it'll take them at least 3 months to build out. And so there's still time involved. But it has happened where, you know, maybe they're looking for a space that's already built out and they can do some very minor changes. Like I had a restaurant brand come in, took over a Vietnamese restaurant. They had a different branding and they just did a very quick weekend renovation.
Just touch-ups, just fresh paint,
just to get open.
New sign, ready to open.
Did their city, you know, very, you know, simple things at the city and just to open. But usually it's a lot more. The thing is, if you're buying an existing business and you're getting the lease assigned to you, and this is important for them to note, like you're not going to get TI or tenant improvement allowance or time.
You started to pay lease day one, right?
You take over and you start paying day one. So that can be challenging, you know. So sometimes, like I've had restaurants do it, well, they'll shut down for 30 days or 60 days to renovate properly, but they're still owing rent because it's just assigned over. There's no free time. And so it's very rare where the landlord will give you 30 days or 60 days where there's no rent. And that's the challenge of an assignment of lease versus a brand new space.
Do you find with all the like new technologies, like people buying everything on Amazon and everything, that this like retail commercial space is changing like lately?
I mean, definitely there's been impact. You know, Amazon, like most people order things from Amazon. So what's the impact to bricks and mortar, the actual physical spaces? A lot of that has disappeared, especially mom and pop stores, where people are now buying from Amazon or other types of sites. You just can't compete because it's free delivery and it's cheaper. And so a lot of people do that, but a lot of people like to support local, for example. But it's interesting. I had a travel agency that I thought most people book travel online, which I'm sure a lot of people do. But and the client is Expedia Cruises, and they said their business is doing better now than it was 5 years ago, because people are doing their research online, but then they'll physically come to their agent and ask them to book the flights, like for a cruise, for example, because it can be complicated. Book your flights and your cruise, and they don't want anything to do with it.
That's what happened to us because we went on a cruise on the Eastern Canada this July. And we, as you said, researched online or on Expedia. But then, because we were ordering 3 suites at a time, because it was 6 of us, the whole family, we couldn't book them on Expedia. They made us call the travel agency and book over the phone. So
and sometimes it gets a little complicated. You don't want to book your flight and miss the cruise, or book the cruise and miss the flight.
Right?
You want it all done. So I used to book it for myself, and then after a while, I said, you know what? I'll just let the travel agent. They know.
And the price was the same. It just they help you with it.
So that's just one example in the travel industry.
The travel industry still
does. They're doing very well. You know, but so it depends on what the product or service is.
During the COVID. I understand that that situation when they had to lock down most of the businesses. Was it in paperwork that you're gonna get some like of this free rent benefit or anything? Like how was it dealt like during that struggling times?
So that was a very tough time for a lot of businesses. I've got a sad story that I'll share. I had a client come in from Dubai, and he was looking to establish himself with his family in Canada. It was right before COVID, and he had an HR business that was running in Dubai, but he wanted his wife and child to get established in Canada. We were looking at different restaurants. He wanted to have a restaurant. So we looked at different restaurants. We bought the restaurant. or he bought the restaurant, and this is now just before COVID. It was just bad timing. It happened to a lot of people. I've seen so much of this where they were going through some renovations and spent some money, and COVID hit and they couldn't open because of COVID. So what do? You could do some curbside service, so the drivers would come and be delivered, but it's not the same as having a packed house full of people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so he tried to sustain for as much as he could, but then he decided this business was not going to work out, and he ended up going back to Dubai, and he took a big loss, unfortunately. So a lot of businesses did suffer, even with loans, even with the CEBA loans that came in, 40,000, 60,000, so on. It wasn't enough to carry people through, because it takes a lot of money for staffing, for inventory, to manage the food business. And so a lot of restaurants just couldn't bear it and went under. So it was really sad. Yeah. Yeah.
But on the other side, not for the landlord, if they also have like mortgages and loans and everything, they still have to pay those, right? Not everybody was.
So, I mean, that was part of the big challenge, was working with landlords, because the majority of landlords were still demanding rent. So how do you pay your rent when you're not getting business? And that will collapse any business if you're not getting cooperation from the landlord.
So now probably you'll see more terms in the contracts regarding those force majeure or something, right?
There you go.
Because nobody could predict that it's going to happen, right? The whole world shut down 2020. So now it's probably people thinking about it, and they start asking the lawyers, right?
It's interesting because that clause, force majeure, came about through COVID.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting you mentioned that, because that was part of clauses before. Yeah. In case there's a temporary shutdown, what happens? Is there abatement of rent? Can there be a pause in rent kind of thing, right? So, yeah.
And can you also tell us what was the biggest deal you ever had to negotiate on in commercial space?
Yeah, one of the biggest deal I've done was by far was an industrial purchase. It used to be the old Crossroads furniture store. Apparently, Canada's largest furniture store. I did not know.
How many square feet?
So it's just off of 16th Avenue, and it used to be the Crossroads Market area and 20th Ave. And so it was sitting on 10 acres of land, about 100,000 square foot building. So my client from Ontario came in and wanted to purchase the place for his own food business. And so that happened, and there's a lot of things that happened in between. It was over a year process. We had to go through a whole land use redesignation, which means we had to change the zoning, which means you have to go through city through
was it part of the deal that it had to?
Well, we had to get cooperation to do that, but the actual seller didn't want to wait 9 months for us to do it. So there was some risk involved for sure by the buyer, but we were confident after talking to some consultants that we could get the approval done. So I brought in a consultant to help with that municipal process. And we did go much faster than 9 months. And you have to get stamped by the city, everything has to be approved. And that was an interesting deal for many reasons, because it was in the Mainland Heights, Vista Heights area. And so the city felt that it was economic improvement and gain for the community. And so they were more than happy to fast track that
cooperate.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you disclose the amount of that deal?
Yeah, so that was a very large purchase. It was $17 million.
17 million. Oh.
Yes, and as a result of that deal, I received an award through CoStar, and that was called the CoStar Impact Acquisition Sale of the Year. So that was an award I received last year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Is this business open now? Are they using it?
No, so it's an old building, so there's a lot of renovations, power requirements that have to be done.
Years and years before we see it.
It'll be at least a year. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, and in the end of our video, can you please tell our viewers how they can find you,
Sure.
where they can get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a website, so. My business is really referral based, and it's been amazing over the last 15 years how the business has grown. And I really depend on people like Alex, people within CIR to refer business to me. But you can contact me via email. My email address is jaison Thomas THOMAS at CIR and then the word realty.ca.
Okay, thank you today, and
Thanks for your time.
thank you.